BBC claims to be the pinnacle of impartial reporting, but what if there was an internal dossier that revealed that wasn't the case? The Telegraph has seen a letter that reveals one of the BBC's own independent advisers repeatedly warned that the broadcaster had serious and systemic problems. A week before the US election, BBC Panorama released a documentary called Trump: A Second Chance, and in it they played the following clip.
We're going to walk down to the Capitol, and I'll be there with you, and we fight. We fight like hell.
But Trump didn't in fact say this at all. The BBC spliced together two clips that took place 54 minutes apart. So let's go through it again.
We're going to walk down to the Capitol, and I'll be there with you.
Now, see there, between Capitol and, that's a cut. Here's what Trump actually said.
We're going to walk down to the Capitol, and we're going to cheer on our brave senators and congressmen and women.
It's different. It wasn't until nearly an hour later that he then said the second part of the BBC's version.
We're going to walk down to the Capitol, and we fight. We fight like hell.
Now, it's true that a lot of people will still feel Trump's claims that in 2021 the election was stolen were entirely inappropriate and unbecoming of a figure in politics. But irrespective of your personal views on Trump, the question remains, how is a national broadcaster funded by taxpayers on the premise that it will provide impartial reporting allowed to splice together content in a way that one of its own advisers said materially misled viewers? And we're not even done yet. The footage Panorama showed of the Proud Boys marching towards the Capitol building, seemingly spurred on by Trump's rousing speech, well, that was actually taken before he'd even addressed the crowd. In fact, the BBC themselves later published a report at odds with Panorama's own timeline.
These are the Proud Boys, another right-wing militia, seen a little earlier that morning.
Out of your boy!
Donald Trump will not appear for another hour or so, but they're already heading towards the Capitol.
They even time-stamped the footage to show that the march began at 10:58 a.m., well before Trump's midday speech. The true chronology raises serious questions about the way in which the BBC decided to portray the events of January the 6th. In fact, the memo highlights that shortly after the first extract of Trump's speech, the now president actually said,
I know that everyone here will soon be marching over to the Capitol building to peacefully and patriotically make your voices heard.
The BBC advisor who wrote this report claimed Panorama's editing was completely misleading, as Trump did not explicitly exhort supporters to go down and fight at Capitol Hill. They even pointed out that this was a key reason why he didn't face federal charges for incitement to riot. The BBC's Editorial Guidelines and Standards Committee member who wrote this memo raised all of these concerns, among others, with the BBC executive, but they were dismissed, ignored, and even accused of cherry-picking. But this isn't the first time we've seen the BBC criticised for selective editing. Cast your mind back to 2007, and you might remember a documentary trailer that appeared to show Queen Elizabeth II storming off in the middle of a photo shoot.
It will look better without the crown. I've heard it will look better, less dressy, because the garter robe is so extraordinary.
Dressy? What do you think this is?
What I mean is, if you take the crown off, just for a couple frames.
Yeah, no. So I'm not changing anything. I've done enough dressing like this. Thank you very much.
But it was later revealed the clips had been reversed, with the footage showing the late Queen storming off actually being the moment she first entered the room. And those seemingly cantankerous comments made during the photo shoot, well, they were just some well-intentioned sarcasm.
Dressing? What do you think this is?
The Crowngate scandal, as it was called at the time, resulted in the resignation of Peter Fincham, the BBC One controller. Now, 18 years later, it appears the broadcaster has not learnt its lesson. The letter states, if BBC journalists are to be allowed to edit video in order to make people say things they never actually said, then what value are the corporation's guidelines? Why should the BBC be trusted And where will this all end? Remember, those aren't my words. They're the words of someone who sat on the Editorial Standards Committee. Should Tim Davie, the now Director General, face the same level of accountability that Peter Fincham did in 2007? Well, that remains for the BBC to decide. But if members of its own Editorial Standards Committee have no faith in the broadcaster, you have to ask, should we?